Did you know that thanks to Jessie's mother, Mewtwo was created, or that there's an official different version of Mewtwo's shiny form? Heir to the DNA of a Pokémon once thought to be nothing more than a mirage, Mewtwo stands as one of the most iconic figures in the Pokémon franchise, alongside Pikachu and Charizard. This genetically engineered powerhouse has one of the most intriguing stories in the Pokémon universe. In this Iceberg, we'll dive into the secrets, mysteries, obscure details, and much more about the clone of the original mythical Pokémon. Welcome to the Mewtwo Iceberg.
Say my name, Eisenberg. You're goddamn right.
Mewtwo is a pseudo-mythical Pokémon. One of the most iconic Pokémon in the history of the franchise, Mewtwo is not just a clone of any Pokémon, but of an ancient mythical creature with incredible power and abilities, including the potential to use every single move. By definition, a clone is a cell product, or organism that is genetically identical to the unit or individual from which it was derived. This would suggest that Mewtwo should be an exact copy of the original. However, while Mewtwo is based on the mythical Pokémon Mew, it is actually an enhanced version, though with the limitation that Mewtwo cannot use every single move. Although Mewtwo meets the criteria of a legendary Pokémon, such as high base stats and a low catch rate like Lugia or Rayquaza, it remains unique because its genetic code is derived from a mythical Pokémon. This raises an important question. What truly defines a Pokémon as mythical? Is there a genetic distinction that sets mythical Pokémon apart from legendary ones? Or does the term simply refer to their extreme rarity and the mystery surrounding them? In fact, if a mythical Pokémon is considered so because there's something in its genetic code that determines it, then Mewtwo might be considered a pseudo-mythical Pokémon simply because, unlike any other creature, it is the only one whose DNA comes from a mythical Pokémon. Considering that's the case, it would be natural to think that Type Null should be also classified as a pseudo-mythical Pokémon, given that it was genetically engineered based on Arceus. However, while this legendary Pokémon was created in the image of the god Pokémon, it doesn't possess any of Arceus's genetic material, unlike Mewtwo, who shares Mew's DNA. Mewtwo at Bill's Lighthouse. It's difficult to pinpoint exactly when Mewtwo was created, as well as how long it took for it to grow from an embryo to the fully developed and powerful creature we see fighting alongside Giovanni. But I'm sure that many agree that the fact that Mewtwo can be seen engraved on the door of Bill's Lighthouse is an impossibility. For this to be remotely possible, Mewtwo had to exist prior to Bill's Lighthouse construction, or at least prior to the door. But also, it means that whoever made that door was aware of Team Rocket's experiments and wanted to depict this mysterious Pokémon in this way. Maybe Mewtwo's physical appearance was inspired by a real Pokémon that looked similar and that was later used to hold Mew's DNA and skills. Although this is definitely a mistake, I like to think about scenarios like this. Mewtwo comes before Mew. If Mewtwo is a clone of Mew, how come it comes before in the Pokedex? The explanation is quite simple, as Mew was added late in development. Also, the fact that there was more evidence about the existence of Mewtwo than Mew itself due to its status as a mythical Pokemon, it's no wonder that Mewtwo's data comes first in the Pokedex. Mewtwo's birthday. This entry refers to the journal in which it says that Mewtwo was born on February 6th. I'm not sure if this date is arbitrary or if it holds significance to Game Freak. Mewtwo was the first Pokémon in the anime. It doesn't refer to the meme where people debate whether Bulbasaur, Rhydon, Arceus or Mew is the first Pokémon, but to the fact that Mewtwo is the very first Pokémon seen in the American intro of the anime's first season. Since the Japanese intro is different, the first Pokémon seen in this version is Charizard. Pokémon Mansion. The Pokémon Mansion holds a lot of information on the history of Mew and Mewtwo. First of all, we can find a couple of journals that talk about how Mew was discovered deep in the jungle of Guyana, South America, a reference that was removed in future games. Also, the infamous Mew gave birth was also removed in Pokémon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Although it sounds as if Mew were the mother and Mewtwo the baby, the scientist is talking metaphorically, a way to imply that Mewtwo was born from Mew's DNA. In Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, we can find 5 glass containers, meaning that not only was Mewtwo cloned, but also 4 other creatures. If we take into account the uncut story of Mewtwo's origin, it's quite possible that those 4 creatures were the 3 Kanto starters and Dr. Fuji's daughter Amber. There has never been any reference to Amber in the core series games, but I'm sure this is a reference to the events of the anime. Most broken Pokémon of all time. When it comes to broken Pokémon, we can think about Darkrai in Gen 4, Mega Rayquaza in Gen 6 or Zacian in Gen 7, but in the context of the original 151, Mewtwo's dominance was beyond anything seen after. What makes Mewtwo the most terrifying Pokémon in Gen 1? Let's start with the Psychic type. Although nowadays Psychic is weak to Bug, Dark and Ghost types, back then the Dark type didn't exist, meaning that only Bug and Ghost Pokémon could destroy Mewtwo, right? No. Those types were virtually inexistent weaknesses of the Psychic type. To begin with, Bug Pokémon were terrible, and the ones who had more or less decent stats such as Scyther and Pinsir had no access to Bug type moves at all. This left us with terrible Pokémon such as Beedrill, with unremarkable attacks such as Twin Needle and Pin Missile. Even if these were good attacks, Beedrill is part Poison, a type weak against the almighty Psychic. Ghost Pokémon are probably an even sadder case. While Psychic Pokémon were planned to be weak against Ghost, an oversight made Ghost-type moves completely ineffective against these Pokémon. Not that it matters, because the only damage-inflicting attack that took the type chart into account was Lick, a 20 power attack. As if that weren't enough, only 3 Pokémon were Ghost-type, and all of them were part Poison. Is it enough that the Pokémon that were supposed to put a stop to Mewtwo are actually the worst option against it? How about making Mewtwo the second fastest Pokémon in that generation? And how about making fast Pokémon more likely to land critical hits? Of course that's not enough, because on top of Mewtwo having the highest special in the game, the special stat in Gen 1 accounts for what we currently know as special attack and special defense, making Mewtwo both an offensive Pokémon and a tank in the special department. Is that all? Of course not, because besides Mewtwo having access to recovery and stats resetting moves, as well as a wide move pool in general, it also can learn Amnesia. Remember how the special stat accounts for both special attack and special defense? With that in mind, Amnesia raised the special stat by 2 stages, meaning that this move is like using 2 Calm Minds in a single turn. Nowadays, its Megaforms are tied with Mega Rayquaza for the second most powerful Pokémon, and actually the most powerful Pokémon if we don't take the unreleased Eternamax Eternatus into account. This genetic monster in its Mega X and Y forms is even more powerful than the god of the Pokémon universe, although we have to take into account that Arceus's real form and power are yet to be seen, as the Pokémon we know is just a fragment of its true self. In spite of the introduction of the Dark and Steel types, the special stat split, refined mechanics, improved Bug and Ghost type attacks, and the emergence of incredibly powerful Pokémon and strategies over the generations, Mewtwo remains a top-tier contender, truly a timeless and overwhelming opponent. Psystrike. Psyshock is an 80 power psychic move that has the quality to inflict physical damage despite being a special move. However, the move Psystrike is a more powerful version of this attack, and it's Mewtwo's signature move. Mewtwo used Shadow Ball in the first generation. We have seen Pokémon that debuted before their generation, and in Mewtwo Strikes Back, we can see a Donphan, but if we talk about moves, one of the most evident is Shadow Ball used by Mewtwo. Besides that, we can also see the move Rapid Spin used by Blastoise too, and actually, Donphan uses Rollout. Unknown Dungeon. The Unknown Dungeon, later renamed Cerulean Cave, is a post-game location in the first generation and its remakes, and it contains incredibly powerful Pokémon including Mewtwo, who used it as a hideout after escaping the Pokémon Mansion in Cinnabar Island. Although I understand the game's limitations back in the day, it's still hard to understand how a cave that is so close to a popular place in the Kanto region ended up being infested with overpowered Pokémon. I have a theory, and that is that the place was originally inhabited by low-level Pokémon such as in Mount Moon, a location also close to Cerulean City. However, once Mewtwo found shelter in that cave, it continued mastering its psychic abilities by fighting the Pokémon in the cave. As time went by, many of the Pokémon in the cave became abnormally strong, forcing the Pokémon League to take action and be in charge of it. This reminds me of Frieza and Tagoma in Dragon Ball Z, when Frieza wanted to become stronger by using Tagoma as his punching bag to defeat Goku. In the process, Tagoma became much stronger as well. Talking about the cave, there's an email found on a computer in the Cinnabar lab that reads the following. The 3 legendary bird Pokémon are Articuno, Zapdos and Moltres. Their whereabouts are unknown. We plan to explore the cavern close to Cerulean. I'm not sure if this refers to the research team planning to explore the cave to see if the legendary birds reside there, or if they're talking about a different expedition, maybe to find another legendary. This might be possible, as let's remember that the founder of said Pokémon lab is none other than Dr. Fuji, the scientist who is said to have created Mewtwo. Mewtwo statues. Back in Pokémon Red, Blue and Yellow, we could see generic statues of Pokémon in the shape of Rhydon due to the Game Boy's limitations. However, from Gen 3 onward and with better graphics, we could see what some of these statues are in reality. In the Pokémon Mansion in Fire Red and Leaf Green, the statues that have secret buttons are actually shaped like Mewtwo. It is odd considering that most probably, they predate the existence of this Pokémon. I know it's just game design, but it's an interesting observation nonetheless. Shadow Mewtwo. We're not talking about conventional shadow Pokémon like those in Pokémon Go or Pokémon Colosseum and XD Gale of Darkness. We're referring to an exclusive version of Mewtwo that appeared in the Tekken-based 3D fighting game Pokken Tournament. When Mewtwo merges with an object called a Shadow Synergy Stone, it becomes Shadow Mewtwo, and it's able to absorb energy that turns it into the most powerful Pokémon in the game and final boss. On top of everything, it is capable of Mega Evolving into Mega Mewtwo X. This Pokémon was designed by the developers at Bandai Namco, and due to this, it is unlikely that we'll see it in the core series games. Berserk Gene. If this item existed nowadays, it would give physical attackers with the ability own tempo an incredible and almost broken advantage. The Berserk Gene was supposed to be Mewtwo's signature item, and it was only available in Pokémon Gold, Silver and Crystal close to the collapsed Cerulean Cave. This item increases the user's attack by 2 stages as soon as the Pokémon enters the battle, although with the downside that it causes confusion. Since own tempo is an ability that ignores confusion, if it were combined with this item, it would have been quite broken, and maybe this is the reason why it was excluded from Generation 3 onward. I'm not sure if there are more items like this, but the Berserk Gene is one of the few hold items besides berries that are exclusive to Pokémon Gold, Silver and Crystal. Mewtwo's awakened form. This is a quick one. Even before the concept of Mega Evolution was revealed, Mewtwo had already been seen Mega Evolving into Mewtwo Y, but back then, this form of Mewtwo was referred to as its awakened form. Mewtwo is a Pokémon Master. What better way to understand Pokémon than by being one? Mewtwo has a deep understanding of many important elements related to Pokémon, including cloning Pokémon as well as being a Pokémon trainer, and not any Pokémon trainer, but a Pokémon Master. Although Mewtwo is a self-proclaimed Pokémon Master, its words might hold some true, as it is extremely skilled as a Pokémon trainer, being able to defeat strong evolved Pokémon in a single hit. This might have to do with its psychic abilities, its power, and and the fact that most probably we're talking about a Pokémon with an incomprehensibly high IQ, surpassing that of Alakazam that is said to be around 5,000. And let's consider that brilliant humans like Isaac Newton had an estimated IQ of around 200. Niue Island's location. Niue Island refers to the place where Mewtwo was created in the anime. This place was destroyed by Mewtwo, but after escaping from Giovanni, it decided to go back and rebuild a laboratory. Although it's not clear where this place lies, there's a map that pinpoints its location south of Cinnabar Island. Mewtwo is a scientist. You might think that Mewtwo is just a powerful legendary Pokémon, but it is far more than that. The Master Ball developed by the Sylph Company is still considered the ultimate Pokéball to this day, but in the first Pokémon movie, we saw an even more powerful Pokéball, one developed by none other than a Pokémon. Though they lack an official name, these Pokéballs created by Mewtwo possess incredible capabilities. They can chase any Pokémon, whether wild or trained, and even if a trainer attempts to protect their Pokémon by recalling them into their Pokéball, these advanced devices will capture them regardless. Beyond its psychic power, Mewtwo demonstrates a profound understanding of genetic engineering, arguably on par with, if not surpassing, Dr. Fuji and his team of scientists. While Dr. Fuji's experiments failed to sustain the lives of Amber and the cloned Kanto starters, Mewtwo survived the cloning process, probably because it possesses the genetic code of a mythical Pokémon. Unlike Dr. Fuji, Mewtwo succeeded in cloning Pokémon and make them even stronger. In the anime, Mewtwo and Mew are portrayed as being on par in terms of power. However, with Mewtwo demonstrating superior intelligence compared to its mythical counterpart, it's likely that Mewtwo would have won their battle if not for Ash's interference. Mewthree. Mewthree is one of the first Pokegods ever mentioned. For those unaware of what a Pokegod is, it refers to a secret powerful Pokemon in Generation 1 that was extremely difficult to obtain, and it generally required some unorthodox methods to unlock, such as beating the Elite Four 50 times in a row or having all Pokemon at level 100. If there was Mew and Mewtwo, why not Mewthree? According to rumor, Mewthree was just Mewtwo with an armor, a supposedly enhanced version of normal Mewtwo. However, in spite of these rumors being false, the name Mewthree has been used in official media. A popular case is that of Red Clefairy in the manga Pokémon Pocket Monsters, in which it receives Mewtwo's DNA and calls itself Mewthree. There's also a Mewthree in the ROM hack Pokémon Chaos Black that happens to evolve in a Pokémon known as Mewtwo X, very similar in name to Mewtwo X. Mewtwo is part human. The Mewtwo we know in the anime is a bit different from the one in the manga. In Pokémon Adventures, Red spots an incomplete Mewtwo inside a tank in the Team Rocket hideout. This is because Mew's DNA wasn't enough to give it a full body, forcing Blaine to provide his cells to complete Mewtwo. Mewtwo was known as the monster of Cerulean City due to its violent behavior, but after being captured by Blaine, it becomes calm and is willing to protect him, risking its own life. Giovanni forgot Mewtwo. We know that only a handful of people knew of Mewtwo's existence, but many of those were killed when Mewtwo escaped, and those who got to battle it on Niue Island forgot about its existence or the events connected to this clone and the mythical Pokémon Mew. However, there was still a person who was well aware of its existence, Giovanni. In Mewtwo Returns, Giovanni and Team Rocket try to recapture the legendary Pokémon, but in the end Mewtwo manages to get rid of their memories. This means that Giovanni no longer remembers that he ordered the creation of Mew's clone. It might be possible that documents on its existence or the expedition carried out in the jungle to retrieve Mew's DNA hold key information for Giovanni to remember and search for Mewtwo once again. Mirage Mewtwo. Mirage Pokémon appeared in the special The Mastermind of Mirage Pokémon, and they are holographic Pokémon created by Dr. Jung. Although I doubt this Mewtwo is close to being as powerful as the original, it is able to use attacks that the original can't, such as Hydro Pump. However, it does it by morphing its hands into other Pokémon. Although at this point almost nobody else besides Ash and company knew about Mewtwo, Dr. Young or the Mirage Master extracts Pikachu's memories to replicate the legendary Pokémon they've met, including Mewtwo, that happens to be the ultimate Pokémon, with no weaknesses and capable of using impossible moves. Amber. If you think that the link between Ash and Mewtwo is the strongest connection this Pokémon has with a human, you might be wrong. Back when Mewtwo was little, its first contact ever was with Amber 2, the clone of Dr. Fuji's deceased daughter. I've talked about Amber many times before, so I'll keep this short. After losing his daughter in a tragic accident, Dr. Fuji attempted to preserve her soul and clone her, a desperate act his wife couldn't bear. Although the initial cloning process seemed promising, it ultimately proved too much for Amber and the clone Kanto starters, leaving Mewtwo as the sole survivor. After enduring this emotional trauma, Dr. Fuji administered the serum to erase Mewtwo's memories of watching its friends disappear before its eyes. Yet, even with those memories gone, one faint echo remained, a single phrase spoken by Amber still resonating deep within its memory: "Life is wonderful." Mewtwo in Smash Bros. Mewtwo debuted in Super Smash Bros. Melee, but it was meant to appear in the original Super Smash Bros. However, considering that there's no leftover data for this Pokémon, it's evident that Sakurai scrapped it very early on due to budget and time constraints. Mewtwo in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Although Mewtwo didn't appear in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, there's unused data for it, as well as for Roy and Dr. Mario, that implies that these characters were developed to some degree but were scrapped. Mewtwo vs. Frieza. Mewtwo and Frieza share some common elements. They're white and purple and were evil at some point. Frieza still is, but these two elements were enough to make people wonder who would win. The Dragon Ball and Pokémon universes are vastly different. On one hand, we have a universe with mortal creatures capable of destroying planets, the solar system, and even entire galaxies, while Pokémon can be quite destructive but not to such extent. This could already provide an answer on who would win, especially considering that Frieza is currently one of the most powerful characters, surpassing the power of some gods. However, some others may argue that Mewtwo's psychic abilities would be able to bend Frieza's will, rendering the Emperor of the Universe completely useless against this genetic monster, in a similar way to how Babidi could control the powerful King of the Demon Realm, a vastly more powerful villain than Frieza in the Dragon Ball Z era. Mewtwo Constellation. I had no idea what this was all about until I saw your picture. I think this looks like Mewtwo. Could this be the constellation called Mewtwo? These are the words spoken by Professor Oak when we show him a picture we take in the cave stage. Left to where a weeping bell is, there's a crystal formation we need to take a picture of. At first glance, it doesn't look like anything, but once developed, we can see the light captured by the camera, resulting in the shape of the legendary Pokémon Mewtwo. How is it that a Pokémon that was supposedly created recently by humans happens to appear in the shape of light emitted by crystals in a cave? There's a phenomenon known as pareidolia, and it's defined as the tendency for perception to impose a meaningful interpretation on a nebulous stimulus, so that one detects an object, pattern, or meaning where there is none. This is what gives us the perception of seeing faces or shapes in clouds, and this could explain why we see a genetically created Pokémon like Mewtwo on a natural formation, but I don't think that pareidolia is the perfect explanation for this, because the resemblance between this light projection and Mewtwo are virtually perfect. Is there something about Mewtwo that we don't know, or is it just a big coincidence? Shining Mewtwo. While the term shiny Pokémon is an official name adopted by Game Freak to refer to the alternately colored Pokémon, they weren't always called that. In fact, they're just called rare in the Gen 2 game's internal data, and in other games they were known as alternate colored Pokémon. It was the fans who named them shiny, and it wasn't until Generation 4 that this Pokemon would officially be called shiny. However, back in 2001, these Pokemon were known as shining Pokemon in the trading card game, and they refer to the same kind of Pokemon. Although most of these Pokemon were faithful to their Game Boy game's colors, an exception was the genetically engineered Pokemon Mewtwo. Shining Mewtwo has a very unique color, as its eyes are yellow and its tail, instead of being green like in its current shiny form, it has a beautiful blue color. This reminds me of a topic I covered in my Pokemon Sword and Shield Iceberg, the potential existence of different types of shiny Pokemon, and seeing Mewtwo in these alternate colors would make for an even more special shiny Pokemon. Niue's $1 coin. Niue is a self-governing island country in the Pacific Ocean and an associated state of New Zealand. What does it have to do with Pokemon? Very little. However, this country released a $1 coin featuring Mewtwo. As you can imagine, this coin goes for a significant price. Mecha Mewtwo. This mechanical marvel was created by Giovanni, the diabolical leader of Team Rocket. It has the power to learn, then amplify and return the attacks of any Pokemon it meets in battle, making it virtually unstoppable. To ensure that Mecha Mewtwo learns every type of Pokemon attack, Giovanni lures trainers to battle him by offering the one-of-a-kind diamond badge to whoever can defeat him. This is the description of Mecha Mewtwo's promo card given out to attendees of the musical Pokemon Live in 2000, who were able to see this 10-feet mechanical monster. Mewtwo didn't debut in Pokemon Red and Blue. Even before Pokemon Red and Blue released in America, Mewtwo, alongside the last stage of the Kanto starters, debuted in America in one of the Game Boy Camera's photo album. Mega Mewtwo X in the anime. There's no question that Mewtwo from the first movie is the most popular Mewtwo, and one that has appeared several times, including a special and several episodes. But there's a Mewtwo that is capable of Mega evolving into Mega Mewtwo Y, and that appeared in Genesect and The Legend Awakened. However, a less known Mewtwo makes an appearance in the ending of Diancie and the Cocoon of Destruction. This Mewtwo is actually capable of evolving into Mega Mewtwo X, and it's unknown if this is the same Mewtwo from the Genesect movie or if it's a completely different one. The birth of Mewtwo. Not to be confused with the uncut story of Mewtwo's origin, The Birth of Mewtwo is a radio drama that never saw the light of day outside of Japan, and it provides information nowhere else to be found about how Team Rocket found out about the existence of the mythical Pokemon Mew and everything that led to Mewtwo's creation. It all started 18 years prior to the events of the anime with Jessie's mother Miyamoto, who was also part of Team Rocket. She described visiting South America and how by using high-sensitivity microphones in the jungle, she was able to pick sounds of a mysterious Pokemon described as the Phantom Pokemon Mew. Miyamoto tells Madame Boss, Giovanni's mother and former leader of Team Rocket, about Mew and how, according to a local legend, the Phantom Pokemon appeared once a year with the rising of the sun, watching over people and Pokemon with its power.
Boss, このテープをお聞きくださいませ。宮本か。おや、宮本ちゃん、儲かってまっか。これ、ロケット団の合言葉。ぼちぼちでんがな、ボス。これ、ロケット団の合言葉。ともかく、テープを聞いてやってくださいませ。こりゃ妙な。
Convinced by the evidence, Madame Boss sends Miyamoto to South America. Jessie's mother finds herself at the peak of a South American mountain range, alongside two other Team Rocket members in the middle of a blizzard. After they become separated, she reflects on her struggle while holding a picture of Jessie. Suddenly, the blizzard clears, giving way to the morning sun, and with it, the appearance of the mythical Pokemon Mew. Unfortunately, Giovanni reveals that Miyamoto was never seen again after an avalanche apparently ended her life. Thanks to Miyamoto's discovery of Mew, the stage was set for the eventual creation of Mewtwo. Did you know that Bowser has a brother, but that this all comes from a visual glitch in the original Super Mario Bros.? My Super Mario Bros. Iceberg is already up on the Eisenberg Experience channel, and with the 40th anniversary approaching, now's the perfect time to check it out. Don't forget to subscribe to both channels if you're into other video games and icebergs. Thank you so much for all your support. See you in the next one.